Alex had always thought of himself as a lucky man. At 33, he had a stable career, a cozy home, and a wife who seemed to light up every room she entered. He and Sarah had been married for 7 years, a relationship built on shared jokes, quiet evenings, and the kind of comfortable routine that made life feel steady and predictable. But lately, something about Sarah felt off. It wasn't anything obvious, just a series of small, subtle changes that Alex couldn't quite put his finger on. She'd been unusually sweet to him, bringing him coffee in bed, kissing him on the cheek more often than usual, and laughing a little too hard at his jokes. At first, he brushed it off as Sarah trying to brighten their lives, but the more he thought about it, the more it felt forced, like she was trying too hard. The week had been a tough one for Alex. Long hours at work and a demanding project had left him drained. By the time Friday evening rolled around, all he wanted to do was collapse on the couch with a beer and let the week melt away. Sarah had other plans. "We have to go to Brittany's party tonight," she said, her voice bright as she walked into the living room. She was already halfway dressed, her makeup flawless and her hair styled into loose curls. Alex frowned, his head resting against the back of the couch. "I thought we agreed I could skip this one. It's been a brutal week, Sarah." She perched on the armrest next to him, her smile not wavering. "Come on, Alex. It's just a couple of hours. You'll have fun once we're there, I promise." "I doubt it," he muttered, rubbing his eyes. Sarah leaned closer, her tone soft and coaxing. "Brittany's been planning this for weeks. She'll be disappointed if we don't show. Plus, I already told her we'd come. Please." Something about the way she said it made Alex hesitate. Her insistence didn't match the situation. They both knew Brittany wouldn't care one way or another if they didn't show up. It was a big party, and they weren't exactly the guests of honor. But Alex didn't have the energy to argue. "Fine," he said with a sigh, pushing himself up from the couch. "Let me get changed." Sarah beamed, giving him a quick kiss on the cheek before heading back to the bedroom to finish getting ready. Alex trudged after her, wondering why it felt like he'd just been played. The drive to Brittany's house was uneventful, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Sarah was unusually chatty, filling the silence with stories about her day and plans for the weekend. Her cheerfulness felt unnatural, like she was trying to distract him from something. When they arrived, the party was already in full swing. Music thumped through the walls, and laughter spilled out onto the front porch. Sarah grabbed his hand, pulling him inside. "Let's grab a drink," she said, her voice high and bright. Alex followed her lead, though he couldn't shake the heavy exhaustion weighing him down. He spent the first half hour making small talk with a few acquaintances, his gaze drifting to Sarah now and then. She was mingling easily, laughing and chatting with everyone, her energy seemingly endless. At one point, Alex noticed her lingering in conversation with a man he didn't recognize. The man was tall, with dark hair and a confident posture that immediately set Alex on edge. He told himself it was nothing. Sarah was friendly and outgoing, and this was probably just a harmless chat. But as the night wore on, Alex's unease grew. Sarah kept glancing at her phone, her smile faltering slightly whenever she checked it. Once, when Alex approached her, she slipped the phone into her pocket so quickly it almost seemed reflexive. "You okay?" he asked, searching her face. "Of course," she replied brightly, her smile a little too wide. "Just keeping up with work stuff." Alex nodded slowly, though the explanation didn't sit right. Work emails were rarely urgent enough to check during a party, and Sarah had always been good about separating her personal time from her job. By the time they left the party, Alex's mind was swirling with questions he couldn't answer. Sarah's sweetness, her insistence on attending the party, her nervous energy. It all added up to something he couldn't quite name. As they drove home in silence, Alex glanced at her, her face illuminated by the glow of the passing streetlights. She stared out the window, a small, contented smile on her lips. He wanted to believe everything was fine, that he was just overthinking things after a long week. But deep down, a small voice whispered that the storm was only just beginning. The party buzzed with life, a swirl of music, chatter, and the clinking of glasses. Alex, already tired from the week, felt out of place in the energetic crowd. He stood near the edge of the living room, nursing a beer, while Sarah seemed to thrive in the lively atmosphere. She floated through the room like she belonged there, greeting old friends and making new ones with ease. Alex couldn't help but admire her. She looked radiant, her dress perfectly fitted, her laughter light and musical. But something about her energy felt different tonight. It wasn't just her usual sociability. She seemed too bright, too animated, as though she were performing for someone. At first, Alex brushed it off as her usual party persona. Sarah had always been more extroverted than he was. She loved connecting with people, and she thrived in social settings. But when she started disappearing from his sight, slipping away into different parts of the house, Alex's unease began to grow. The first time, she excused herself to the kitchen for a drink. When Alex followed a few minutes later, she wasn't there. He searched briefly, then shrugged it off, assuming she'd been pulled into another conversation along the way. The second time, she disappeared to check something on her phone. When Alex wandered toward the hallway, looking for her, he caught a glimpse of her standing near a group of people, too close to one person in particular. Logan. Alex recognized him from a previous gathering. Logan was a friend of Ted's, a coworker Sarah had mentioned in passing a few times. He was tall, with a confident smile and an easy charm that made him the center of attention. Alex didn't know much about him, but something about the way Sarah was standing with him, leaning slightly toward him, her smile just a little too warm, set Alex's teeth on edge. He watched from the edge of the room as Logan leaned in to say something, his hand brushing Sarah's arm briefly. Sarah laughed, tilting her head back in that way she always did when she was genuinely amused. Alex frowned. It was probably nothing, he told himself. Sarah was friendly and charismatic. People naturally gravitated toward her. But the moment lingered in his mind, a thorn of doubt he couldn't shake. When Sarah finally returned to his side, her cheeks were flushed, and her smile was dazzling. "Having fun?" she asked, slipping her arm around his waist. Alex forced a smile. "Sure. You've been busy tonight. Just catching up with people," she said lightly, taking a sip from her drink. "And Logan?" he asked casually, watching her reaction. Sarah's smile faltered for the briefest moment, her eyes flickering to his. "What about him? You two seemed pretty chummy," Alex said, keeping his tone neutral. Sarah laughed, though it sounded a bit forced. "Oh, come on, Alex. He's just a friend of Ted's. We were talking about work stuff. Nothing interesting." Alex nodded, though his suspicions didn't ease. "Work stuff, huh?" "Yeah," she said quickly, her smile returning. "Logan's got this big project coming up, and he wanted some advice. You know me, I can't resist playing mentor." Alex didn't reply. Sarah's explanation sounded plausible, but the way she delivered it, too fast, too rehearsed, only made his unease grow. The rest of the evening passed uneventfully, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Sarah continued to mingle, her laughter ringing through the room, but Alex found himself watching her more closely now, his mind replaying the moments he'd seen. When they finally left the party, Sarah was in high spirits. She chatted happily about the evening, but Alex barely heard her. He was too busy trying to make sense of the growing knot in his stomach. As they pulled into their driveway, Alex parked the car and turned to her. "You really seem to enjoy yourself tonight," he said, his voice even. Sarah glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Of course I did. It was a great party." "Why?" "No reason," Alex replied, his tone casual. "Just making an observation." She smiled faintly, leaning over to kiss him on the cheek. "You worry too much, you know that?" Alex didn't respond. He watched as she got out of the car, her laughter still echoing in his ears. Inside, as Sarah headed to bed, Alex lingered in the living room, replaying the night in his mind. The way she'd acted around Logan, the fleeting look of hesitation when he'd asked about him. It all gnawed at him. He wanted to trust her, to believe that he was just reading too much into things. But deep down, He couldn't ignore the growing suspicion that something was very wrong. The house was eerily quiet as Alex walked up the stairs. It was past midnight, and he'd assumed Sarah was already asleep. She'd excused herself to bed earlier, claiming she was exhausted from the party. Alex had stayed downstairs, staring blankly at the muted television, replaying the events of the night in his head. But now, as he climbed the steps, he thought he heard something. Faint voices coming from the direction of the guest room. His brow furrowed. They were quiet, barely audible, but distinct enough to catch his attention. He froze at the top of the stairs, straining to listen. One voice was unmistakably Sarah's, soft but animated. The other, deeper and unfamiliar, sent a chill down his spine. Logan. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he walked slowly toward the door. The voices became clearer, their hushed tones growing more frantic as he approached. "I told you it's risky," Sarah said, her voice low but urgent. "It doesn't matter," Logan replied. "You can't keep this up forever." Alex stopped outside the door, his breath catching in his throat. The doorknob was just inches away, but his hand refused to move. Every instinct screamed at him to burst in, but part of him hesitated, as though doing so would make the nightmare real. Another muffled laugh from Logan shattered his hesitation. Without thinking, Alex pushed the door open. The room fell silent in an instant. Sarah and Logan stood by the window, their bodies angled toward each other in a way that left no room for doubt. Logan's hand was on her arm, his fingers brushing her skin, while Sarah looked up at him with an expression Alex couldn't quite decipher. Part guilt, part something else he didn't want to name. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, the hands glowing faintly in the dim light. It read exactly 1 in the morning. "What the hell is going on here?" Alex demanded, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Sarah stepped back from Logan, her face paling as her eyes met Alex's. "Alex, it's not what it looks like," she stammered, her voice shaking. Logan, to his credit, didn't try to move or speak. He stood frozen, his hand still hovering in the air where it had been on Sarah's arm. "Not what it looks like?" Alex repeated, his voice rising. "Really? Because it looks pretty damn clear to me." Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her silence was answer enough. Alex turned his glare to Logan. "Get out," he growled, his fists clenched at his sides. "Now." Logan hesitated, glancing at Sarah as though waiting for her to say something. But when she stayed silent, he nodded stiffly and moved toward the door. As Logan brushed past him, Alex stepped aside but couldn't resist adding, "If I ever see you near her, or this house, again, I swear to God you'll regret it." Logan didn't respond. He disappeared down the stairs, leaving Alex and Sarah alone in the room. The silence that followed was suffocating. Sarah stood by the window, her arms wrapped around herself as though she could shield herself from Alex's gaze. "How long?" Alex asked finally, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. Sarah looked down, her lips quivering. "Alex, how long?" he repeated, louder this time. She hesitated, then whispered, "A few months." The admission hit Alex like a punch to the gut. He staggered back, his mind reeling. "Months? You've been lying to me for months." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she tried to step toward him. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did." Alex laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "It just did? That's your excuse? You've been sneaking around with him, lying to my face, and all you can say is it just did?" "I'm sorry," Sarah choked out, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Well, congratulations," Alex said coldly. "Because you didn't just hurt me, you destroyed us. Everything we've built together, gone." Sarah sobbed, but Alex couldn't bring himself to feel any sympathy. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. He turned to leave the room, pausing at the door. "I hope he was worth it, Sarah, because after this, there's no coming back." With that, he walked out, leaving her standing alone in the guest room. The weight of the betrayal pressed heavily on his chest, but one thing was clear. The life he thought he knew was over. The next day, Alex couldn't shake the events of the night before. The confrontation with Sarah and Logan in the guest room replayed in his mind like a broken record. He wanted to put it behind him, but Sarah's betrayal, and her lackluster apology, left him seething. The real breaking point came that evening when Sarah suggested they go to another party hosted by their mutual friends. "You want to go to another party?" Alex asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "After what happened last night?" Sarah looked at him with practiced innocence, her expression calm. "Yes, Alex. It's Brittany's engagement party. We already RSVP'd. We can't just not show up." Alex's jaw tightened. He knew she wasn't suggesting this out of social obligation. She was trying to smooth things over, to pretend like nothing had happened. "You're unbelievable," Alex said, shaking his head. "You think going to a party is going to fix this?" Sarah's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "I think it's a chance for us to act like adults. We'll show up, be polite, and enjoy the evening. We don't need to air our dirty laundry in front of everyone. Right?" Alex said bitterly. "Because keeping up appearances is more important than dealing with the fact that you've been cheating on me for months." Her expression hardened, but she didn't reply. Reluctantly, Alex agreed to go. He didn't want to make a scene, but the anger simmering beneath the surface left him feeling like a pressure cooker ready to explode. The party was held at a swanky downtown venue, with string lights casting a warm glow over the gathered guests. Brittany looked radiant in her engagement dress, laughing and chatting with everyone. Alex stayed near the edges of the room, nursing a drink and keeping a watchful eye on Sarah. It didn't take long for tensions to boil over. Alex had been speaking to Ted when he noticed Sarah across the room. She was standing near Logan again, her posture too casual, her laughter too bright. Alex's grip on his glass tightened. He strode across the room, ignoring Ted's confused look. When he reached them, Sarah's smile faded as she turned to face him. "Alex," she said, her voice tense. "What are you doing?" "What am I doing?" Alex repeated, his voice low but sharp. "What are you doing, Sarah? Haven't you had enough of this?" Guests nearby began to glance in their direction, their conversations faltering. Sarah's face flushed as she stepped closer to Alex. "Keep your voice down," she hissed. "Why?" Alex shot back, his voice rising. "So no one finds out what a liar you are? You've been sneaking around with him," he gestured toward Logan, "for months, and now you want to act like I'm the problem." Logan shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting toward the exit. "Maybe I should go." "Good idea," Alex snapped, glaring at him. Logan quickly excused himself, leaving Sarah to face the growing attention of the crowd. She turned back to Alex, her eyes blazing with anger. "Do you have any idea how ridiculous you sound right now?" she said through gritted teeth. "You're exaggerating everything." "Exaggerating?" Alex laughed bitterly. "I caught you, Sarah. I walked in on you too. And you think I'm exaggerating?" Her hands balled into fists at her sides. "You've been so cold for the past 2 years, Alex. You act like everything's fine, but you've been distant, closed off. Don't you think that has something to do with this?" The accusation hit Alex like a slap. For a moment, he stared at her, stunned by her audacity. "So this is my fault?" he said, his voice quiet but trembling with fury. "You're saying that I'm the reason you cheated? That I pushed you into Logan's arms?" "I'm saying it's not black and white," Sarah shot back. "You haven't exactly been a perfect husband, Alex. Maybe if you'd paid more attention to me, this wouldn't have happened." Alex stepped back, his chest heaving with anger. The crowd around them had grown quiet, their whispered conversations barely audible over the pounding in his ears. "Unbelievable," Alex said, shaking his head. "You betrayed me, Sarah. You lied to me to my face for months. And now, instead of taking responsibility, you're trying to blame me? You're pathetic." Her face crumpled for a moment, but she quickly composed herself, her expression turning icy. "You're making a scene," she said quietly. "Good," Alex replied. "Maybe it's time everyone knows the truth." He turned and walked away, leaving Sarah standing alone in the middle of the room, the weight of their crumbling marriage hanging in the air. The fallout from the confrontation at Brittany's engagement party was swift and brutal. By the next morning, Alex could feel the ripple effects beginning to spread. Mutual friends who had once been warm and supportive now seemed hesitant, their texts and calls laced with a careful neutrality he hadn't seen before. At first, Alex chalked it up to the awkwardness of the situation. Public confrontations had a way of making people uncomfortable, and he figured they just didn't know how to handle the tension between him and Sarah. But as the days went on, it became clear that something more insidious was at play. One evening, as Alex scrolled through his social media, he noticed several posts from friends that seemed oddly pointed. Phrases like, "There are two sides to every story," and "Don't believe everything you hear," peppered his feed, accompanied by vague comments about relationships and jealousy. It wasn't long before he began piecing it together. Sarah was spreading rumors. At first, Alex didn't want to believe it. Despite everything that had happened, a small part of him had clung to the hope that she wouldn't stoop so low. But then he started hearing it directly from friends. "Hey man," Ted said awkwardly over the phone one evening. "I just wanted to check in. I heard from Sarah that, well, she's been saying you've been following her around or something." Alex froze, gripping the phone tighter. "Following her? What the hell are you talking about?" "I don't know," Ted replied quickly, clearly uncomfortable. "She just mentioned it at lunch the other day. Said you've been showing up unannounced and acting erratic." Alex's blood boiled. "That's a complete lie," he said firmly. "I haven't been anywhere near her since the party." Ted hesitated. "I figured there was more to the story, but, she's been showing people messages, too. Stuff that makes it look like you've been texting her nonstop." "What messages?" Alex demanded, his heart sinking. "I don't know, man. She didn't show me directly, just said they were intense." When the call ended, Alex sat in stunned silence. Sarah wasn't just spreading rumors. She was actively fabricating evidence to make him look unhinged. The betrayal cut deeper than he thought possible. The next day, Alex received a screenshot from another friend, one of the few still willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. The screenshot showed a conversation purportedly between Alex and Sarah, with Alex's name and photo at the top. The messages were alarming. "I saw you with him again. You'll regret this. I'm not letting you ruin my life. You can't get away from me, Sarah." Alex stared at the screen, his hands shaking. The messages were fake. He'd never sent anything like that. But the way they were presented was disturbingly convincing. Sarah had gone to great lengths to make it look like he was stalking and harassing her. Fueled by anger, Alex called his closest friend, Mike, who had always been fiercely loyal and level-headed. "She's trying to destroy me," Alex said, his voice trembling. "She's spreading lies, making me look like some obsessed lunatic. She even faked messages to back it up." Mike didn't hesitate. "We need to shut this down," he said firmly. "If she's faking evidence, we can prove it. Give me a day, and I'll figure out our next move." True to his word, Mike came through. He found inconsistencies in the screenshots Sarah had shared, pointing out subtle errors in formatting and timestamps that didn't align with Alex's real messaging history. With this information, Alex began to piece together a defense. But the damage was already spreading. Friends he'd known for years were distancing themselves, clearly unsure of what to believe. The whispers about his supposed jealousy and unstable behavior followed him everywhere, making every interaction feel strained and uncomfortable. One afternoon, Alex confronted Sarah directly. "You've crossed a line," he said coldly, standing on her front porch. "Lying about me is one thing, but faking evidence? That's disgusting, even for you." Sarah crossed her arms, her expression smug. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said sweetly. "Maybe you're just upset because people are starting to see the real you." "The real me?" Alex laughed bitterly. "You mean the person you cheated on and then tried to destroy when I called you out? That real me?" Sarah's face darkened for a moment before her smirk returned. "You've always been so dramatic, Alex. Maybe if you'd been this passionate about our marriage, things wouldn't have ended this way." Alex clenched his fists, his anger barely contained. "This isn't over," he said through gritted teeth. "You can lie to everyone else, but you know the truth. And eventually they will too." As he walked away, he felt the weight of the battle ahead pressing down on him. Sarah had turned their breakup into a war, one where lies and manipulation were her weapons of choice. But Alex wasn't going to let her win. He would fight back, not just to clear his name, but to ensure the truth came out. For the first time since this nightmare began, Alex felt a flicker of determination. Sarah might have started this war, but Alex was ready to finish it. The lies Sarah was spreading had reached a boiling point, and Alex knew he couldn't sit idly by any longer. She had crossed every line imaginable, and her fabricated messages were beginning to poison friendships and his reputation. He needed to fight back, not with anger or empty words, but with the truth. One evening, Alex sat in his dimly lit living room, his laptop open and his mind racing. His thoughts kept circling back to the same question. How could he prove Sarah's deceit and clear his name? The answer came when he remembered an old college acquaintance, Elizabeth, who had become a well-respected lawyer. The next morning, Alex contacted her, and by the afternoon, he was sitting across from her in her sleek office. Elizabeth listened intently as Alex recounted everything. Sarah's betrayal, the rumors, the fake messages, and her escalating smear campaign. "She's systematically trying to destroy me," Alex said, his voice tight with frustration. "I don't even know where to start." Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, her expression calm but thoughtful. "First, we need to get organized," she said. "If Sarah is spreading false information and faking evidence, we need to prove it. That means gathering as much documentation as possible. Texts, emails, screenshots, anything that shows the inconsistencies in her story. And if we can find witnesses or recordings that contradict her claims, even better." Alex nodded, relief washing over him at her steady confidence. "I'll do whatever it takes. I just need to clear my name." Elizabeth smiled faintly. "Good. Let's start by focusing on the fake messages. If we can prove they're fabricated, it will undermine her credibility and call the rest of her claims into question." Feeling more determined than ever, Alex left Elizabeth's office with a clear plan. He reached out to Ted, one of the few friends who hadn't been swayed by Sarah's lies. Ted had always been level-headed and observant, and Alex hoped he might have noticed something that could help. "You wouldn't believe what Sarah's been saying about me," Alex said when they met at a quiet coffee shop later that day. "I know," Ted replied, shaking his head. "She's been spinning this whole story about how you've been harassing her. Honestly, it doesn't add up. That's why I haven't taken her side. I know you, Alex. This isn't you." "Thanks, Ted," Alex said, his voice heavy with gratitude. "But I need more than your belief. I need evidence. Do you know anything at all, that could prove she's lying?" Ted hesitated for a moment, then leaned in closer. "Actually, there might be something. A couple of weeks ago, I overheard Logan talking to a mutual friend at the bar. He was bragging about Sarah covering for him. Said something like, 'She's been helping me clean up the mess. She's a pro at spinning stories.' At the time, I didn't think much of it, but now," Alex's heart raced. "Do you think there's any way to get proof of that conversation? Like an audio recording?" Ted's eyes lit up. "Funny you should ask. The bar they were at records all conversations at the counter for security reasons. I'm on good terms with the manager. I might be able to get my hands on the footage or the audio file." "Can you try?" Alex asked, his voice urgent. "This could be exactly what I need." Ted nodded. "Leave it to me. I'll call you as soon as I have something." 2 days later, Ted came through. He handed Alex a USB drive containing an audio file of Logan's conversation at the bar. As Alex played the recording, his heart pounded. The voices were clear, even over the faint clinking of glasses and background chatter. "I don't know what I'd do without Sarah," Logan said, his tone smug. "She's been covering for me like a champ. That whole thing with Alex, she's got it handled. She even made some fake texts to keep him off balance. The guy doesn't stand a chance." Alex paused the recording, his blood boiling. It was all there. proof that Sarah and Logan were conspiring to destroy him. He immediately forwarded the file to Elizabeth, who responded within minutes. "This is gold," she wrote. "With this, we can prove collusion between Sarah and Logan. Let's schedule a meeting to discuss our next steps." For the first time in weeks, Alex felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't just fighting back anymore, he was winning. Sarah had underestimated him, but the tide was turning, and Alex was determined to make sure the truth prevailed. With the audio recording from Ted and the advice from Elizabeth, Alex finally felt like he had the tools to fight back. He was done being the passive target of Sarah's lies, and it was time to expose the truth to everyone who had been manipulated by her stories. But he knew he needed more than just the recording to completely dismantle her web of deceit. The opportunity for that came from an unexpected ally, Emma, one of Sarah's closest friends. Emma and Sarah had been friends for years, but Emma's loyalty to Sarah had limits. She had always been perceptive and quick to spot when someone was crossing a line, and Alex had always liked her for her blunt honesty. When Emma heard Sarah's version of the events, she grew suspicious. "Alex, can we talk?" Emma had texted him out of the blue one evening. Curious and slightly apprehensive, Alex agreed to meet her at a small cafe. "I've heard the things Sarah's been saying about you," Emma said when they sat down. "I didn't want to believe it, but she's shown me texts, screenshots, things that make you look really bad. At first, I thought maybe you'd snapped or something, but now, it's just not adding up." Alex sighed, rubbing his temples. "Emma, those messages are fake. I would never say those things. Sarah's been spreading lies to cover up her own actions." Emma studied him closely. "You're saying she made them up?" "Yes," Alex said firmly, "and I can prove it. I have an audio recording of Logan admitting that Sarah's been helping him cover their tracks. She's been manipulating everyone to make me look like the bad guy." Emma's eyes widened. "If that's true, then—" She hesitated, then leaned in closer. "You know, I've seen Sarah typing things on her phone that didn't make sense. Messages she said were from you, but she never opened them in front of me. I thought it was weird." Alex looked at her intently. "Emma, I need your help. If you have access to her phone, if you can find any of those messages or conversations between her and Logan, it could change everything." Emma hesitated, clearly torn. "You're asking me to betray my friend." "She's not your friend, Emma," Alex said quietly. "She's using you, just like she's using everyone else. If you can help me prove the truth, it's not betrayal, it's justice." Emma stared at him for a long moment before nodding. "Okay, let me see what I can do." 2 days later, Emma sent Alex a message. "Got something. Meet me tonight." When they met, Emma handed Alex her phone with a screenshot displayed on the screen. It was a text conversation between Sarah and Logan. "Sarah, he's starting to fight back. You need to stay quiet. Don't let anyone know we're still talking. Logan, relax. We've come this far. He's too focused on clearing his name to figure out the rest. Sarah, good. Keep it that way. I'll handle the rest." Alex's hands shook as he stared at the messages. This was it, the smoking gun. "Emma, this is exactly what I needed," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. Emma smiled faintly. "I hope it helps. I couldn't stand seeing her twist things anymore." Armed with the screenshot, the audio recording, and the evidence Elizabeth had helped him compile, Alex was ready to launch his counterattack. He carefully composed an email, attaching all the evidence, and addressed it to the mutual friends and acquaintances who had been caught in Sarah's web of lies. The subject line read, "The truth about Sarah and Logan." In the email, Alex explained everything, laying out the timeline of events and presenting the evidence without embellishment. He included the audio recording of Logan admitting Sarah's complicity, the screenshot of their text messages, and the inconsistencies in the fake messages Sarah had created. He ended the email with a simple message. "I've been accused of things I didn't do, and I've stayed quiet for too long. The truth is here for you to see. I hope this clears up any doubts you might have had." Once he hit send, Alex felt a mixture of nervousness and relief. There was no going back now. The response was immediate. Within hours, friends and acquaintances began reaching out to him, some apologizing for believing Sarah's lies, others expressing shock at the extent of her manipulation. Ted called him, his voice filled with disbelief. "Alex, this is insane. I can't believe she did all this. You were right all along." Even Emma texted him, "People are talking. I think she's finally been exposed." Sarah, of course, wasn't happy. She sent Alex a flurry of angry messages, accusing him of ruining her life and invading her privacy. But Alex didn't respond. He didn't need to. The truth was out, and for the first time in weeks, Alex felt like he had regained control. Sarah's lies had been dismantled piece by piece, and her carefully constructed narrative had crumbled under the weight of the evidence. The war she had started was over, and Alex had emerged victorious. The ripple effect of Alex's counterattack was both immediate and far-reaching. Once the email circulated among their mutual friends and acquaintances, it didn't take long for the truth to spread. The damning evidence, the audio recording of Logan, the screenshots of Sarah's manipulative conversations, and the exposure of the fabricated messages, spoke louder than any words Alex could have offered. First, there was silence. The people who had once avoided Alex or questioned his character didn't reach out immediately, likely stunned by the revelations. But soon, the apologies and messages of support began to roll in, one after another. "I can't believe she did this to you," wrote Brittany, the hostess of the infamous party. "I feel awful for even entertaining her version of events. You didn't deserve this." Ted called again, this time with a mixture of guilt and relief in his voice. "Alex, man, I owe you an apology. I didn't know what to believe at first, but now it's so obvious. She played all of us. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." Even acquaintances who had barely been involved reached out with kind words. "I'm so sorry for everything you've been through," one person wrote. "You handled this with more grace than I could have." The most gratifying messages came from those who had once defended Sarah. These were the people who had bought into her lies, who had whispered about Alex's supposed jealousy and instability. Now, they were faced with the undeniable truth, and their words reflected the shame and regret of having believed her. As for Sarah, her carefully constructed image began to crumble. People who had once admired her charm and charisma started to distance themselves, unwilling to associate with someone who had so blatantly manipulated and deceived those around her. Rumors began circulating, not from Alex but from those who had seen the evidence firsthand. Whispers of her affair with Logan, her fake messages, and her attempts to ruin Alex's reputation spread quickly, tarnishing her name in the very social circles she had once dominated. Sarah tried to push back. She posted vague, emotional messages on social media about betrayal and false narratives, but they fell flat. People weren't interested in her attempts to spin the story anymore. The evidence Alex had shared was too compelling to ignore. For Alex, the shift in perception was a relief. Friends who had once been distant now rallied around him, offering their support and understanding. "You're stronger than most people would be in your situation," Emma told him over coffee one afternoon. "The way you handled this calmly with facts and integrity, it says a lot about who you are." Emma's words stayed with him. For weeks, Alex had felt powerless, trapped in a nightmare of lies and betrayal. But now, with the support of those who truly mattered, he realized he had come out on top. Not just in the battle with Sarah, but in proving to himself that he could rise above the chaos. The moral superiority wasn't about rubbing Sarah's downfall in her face. It was about reclaiming his dignity, his name, and his sense of self. He no longer felt the need to explain himself to anyone. The truth was out, and it had spoken louder than he ever could. In the weeks that followed, Alex focused on rebuilding his life. He leaned on his friends, resumed hobbies he had neglected during the turmoil, and even began exploring therapy to process the emotional toll of the ordeal. Sarah, meanwhile, faded into the background. Her social presence dwindled, and the network of friends she had once relied on for validation began to unravel. One evening, as Alex sat on his porch with Ted and Emma, sharing a laugh over something trivial, he felt a rare moment of peace. The storm that had engulfed his life had finally passed, leaving him stronger and more self-assured. "She thought she could destroy me," Alex said, his tone calm but resolute. "But in the end, All she did was expose herself. Ted raised his glass in a toast. To truth, to friends, and to moving on. Alex clinked his glass with theirs, a small smile on his face. For the first time in what felt like forever, the future looked bright, and he was ready to embrace it, free from lies, betrayal, and the weight of Sarah's manipulations. The tension between Alex and Sarah reached its peak one evening, weeks after her lies had been exposed. Her reputation had taken a significant hit, and her social circle had all but evaporated. Friends who once supported her had distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with someone who had gone to such lengths to manipulate and deceive. For Alex, the days were growing quieter. The messages of support from friends had eased his mind, and the storm that Sarah had created was finally settling. But he knew her well enough to expect that she wouldn't let things go without one last desperate attempt to regain control. Came on a Thursday evening. Alex was sitting at home, unwinding after work, when his phone buzzed with an unexpected call from an unknown number. He hesitated but answered. "Alex." Sarah's voice came through, sharp and strained. "What do you want?" Alex asked, his tone firm and calm. "We need to talk," she said, her words clipped. "Face to face." "There's nothing left to talk about, Sarah," Alex replied, leaning back in his chair. "You've done enough damage." "This isn't over," she snapped. "You think you can just ruin my life and walk away like nothing happened?" Alex chuckled bitterly. "Ruin your life? You did that all on your own, Sarah. All I did was show people the truth." There was a pause, and when Sarah spoke again, her voice was lower, almost menacing. "You don't know who you're messing with, Alex. I have ways of making your life miserable." Alex shook his head, unimpressed by the empty threat. "Sarah, stop. You're grasping at straws. Everyone knows what you did, and no amount of intimidation is going to change that." "You think you're so righteous," she hissed. "But you're no better than me." "That's where you're wrong," Alex said, his voice steady. "I didn't lie. I didn't cheat. I didn't manipulate our friends or fabricate evidence to ruin someone's life. You can't stand the fact that you've been exposed for who you really are." Her breathing was heavy on the other end of the line, and for a moment, Alex thought she might hang up. Instead, she said, "You'll regret this. One day, you'll regret everything you've done to me." Alex's grip on the phone tightened, but he kept his composure. "No, Sarah. The only regret I have is not seeing the truth about you sooner. Now, this conversation is over." He ended the call, letting out a long breath as he set the phone down. An hour later, there was a knock at his door. Alex's stomach tightened as he got up to answer it, already suspecting who it might be. When he opened the door, there she was, Sarah, her face flushed with anger and her eyes wild. "You don't get to walk away from me like that," she spat, stepping forward. Alex blocked her path, standing tall and firm. "You need to leave, Sarah. Now. You think you've won?" she demanded, her voice rising. "You've turned everyone against me. You think that makes you some kind of hero?" Alex met her gaze, unflinching. "This isn't about winning, Sarah. It's about the truth. You brought this on yourself. You lied, you cheated, and you tried to destroy me when I called you out. Now you're just trying to shift the blame because you can't handle the consequences of your actions." Her hands trembled, whether from anger or frustration. Alex couldn't tell. "You have no idea what I've been through," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "And you have no idea what you put me through," Alex replied, his tone soft but resolute. "But I'm done letting you control this narrative. I'm done letting you intimidate me. The truth is out and it's over, Sarah. Go home." She stared at him for a long moment, her face twisting with a mix of emotions. Anger, desperation, and something that almost looked like regret. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. Alex watched her leave, feeling a strange sense of closure wash over him. For the first time, he truly felt the power of standing his ground, of knowing that the truth was on his side. As he closed the door and returned to his quiet home, he realized that this was the final chord in the chaotic symphony Sarah had composed. The storm was over, and Alex was finally free to move forward, leaving the lies and betrayal behind him.